Yes, we are recording.
Okay. So welcome everybody. Let me share my screen. And today we're going to talk about the non-functional requirements.
Okay. So let me do this, that. Okay, so you want to go ahead and put it in slideshow mode so it'll be easier for people to see it, Steve?
Yeah, I just did. Let's see.
Okay. There we go.
Oh,
Yay!
hang on. I was complaining about my screen resolution, so
Well, then you
it's
should get
doing
a
something
better
weird.
screen.
It looked good on our end.
Well, that's the problem. It has too high a resolution for the presentation for some reason. Weird. Let me try this again.
Okay, I deliberately went no graphics at all on this thing.
Yeah. All right.
Yay, okay. So shall I go ahead and get started?
Yep.
Okay. So what we're going to talk about, why don't you go to the next slide, Steve, is something that's actually really important in an architecture, which is the non-functional requirements. What we tend to do is we think about what the system does. So we can do things like ask questions like, how many applications or solutions use log4j? That's an example of what Ortelius does. That's not what non-functionals are about. Non-functionals, we often talk about them being the qualities of the system, and people will struggle to turn them all into one-word descriptions that end in ility. So securability, usability, performability, I'm not even sure that's a word. Scalability is, however. So those are things that, you know, the classically the application designer doesn't necessarily think very much about. Although usability is certainly one that an application designer needs to think about. But some examples, and again, these are requirements. They're not how we're going to solve this problem. There's what is it we need to be able to accomplish. So a classic one is uptime. So loads of people say, oh, I want 6 nines of availability. That means 99.9999% available. And, if you start doing calculations like that, we take days times 24 equals times point. We start talking about how many hours could the system be down? And then there's the other side of it, which is something like, oh, I'm really designing it for kind of the workday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., 5 days a week. And, a classic place you used to find that was in banking, where the bank had to run during the business day and not on weekends. And then what happened was internet banking came in, 20-ish years ago. And suddenly people had to deal with the fact that folks wanted to go online and look at their banking position at any time of the day or night, any day. So that you have to start designing system differently. So part of what we have to think about for Ortelius is, what is that design? Another question that goes along with that is, we're going to do an update. Is it an update in place while the system is running? Does the system have to come down? You can extend that, by the way, to things like, the operating system underneath the solution. Okay, we're containerized. What if the container host has to be updated? That kind of thing. Another one is performance.
A quick
So we
question
need,
on the
yes.
uptime one, Tony.
Mhm.
Because Ortelius is going to be used by different customers, and different customers will have different uptime requirements.
Mhm.
How do we kind of hammer out the non-functional requirements around that? Do we take the worst case scenario, which would be 24/7, or do we lay it out per, like, in tiers? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does make sense. Kate, do you want to take a run at that before I answer?
Sure. So in looking at the mission statement and just starting this, I would personally say that it's important to have it be a 24-hour type of system that you're looking at. It's interesting that you talk about tiers because some will need more than less, and it's something. One of the and Tony, I'm sure you know this, working with the Fortune 1000 customers as opposed to the small and medium. Sometimes I feel like we give them too much, the small and medium folks, that it overwhelms what they're trying to do. And so it's interesting, Steve, that you brought up tiers, but I do think that we need to have this view of being a 24-hour available type of system. Personally, that's what I think.
So let me zip in and say, I like the idea of tiers very much, Steve. But are we assuming there will be a single instance of Ortelius sitting out in the cloud that everybody that does a build through GitHub uses, which is tens of thousands all over the world? Are we assuming that it'll be, a desktop instance like Sasha's built for a smaller organization? So what we might say is, and
Tony,
go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do think that we're going to need both, right? We're going to need that on-prem for folks who can't go to the cloud for whatever reason. But we also, I think, need that huge.
Well, again, we have to characterize, and there's no real right answer to this. What we say is we're designing for this point. And this point might be, a small to medium-sized organization, and I've been having a different discussion over an open group about this. Something on the order of 99% of businesses around the North America, and I think this extends around the world, are fewer than 500 people. And if you think about a business like that, their IT staff is what? 5, 10 folks?
Yeah, I was gonna say a dozen at the most.
Yeah, and most of
I'll
them
ask a,
application
I'll ask a
developers.
question.
Sasha,
Quickly. What's a small to medium enterprise in America? What do
generally
you
it's
classify?
fewer than 500 people.
Okay.
You
In
you
South
can
Africa,
get
it's even tinier. It's like we're 50 people and we're small to medium.
absolutely. How many people?
And the DevOps engineers are 2 people servicing all the clients. That's
Oh
me
yeah,
and my buddy.
there's an
That's
enormous
it.
number of businesses. Steve, how many people does Deploy Hub have?
2, well, 3.
3, right. That's not at all uncommon.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
When we think about the Fords and, Mercedes and Airbus and people like that, that's a tiny percentage of businesses in the world. Now, they are a huge percentage of technology spend, which is kind of a different metric. But I guess the point all of us are making, and thank you, Kate, is you have to have some sense of your target. So if we think about the fact that we're going to design this, and one of the ways you do it is you create a baseline instance that says, this is suitable for, this size of organization. And if you want to scale it up, here's what you do. And recognize that not everybody is going to go to the cloud and stay in the cloud. I don't know how many of you guys follow Dave Lithicum, for example, on LinkedIn. He's Deloitte's Top Gun cloud guy. Is an example of somebody talking about this. An awful lot of people have finally gotten out their envelope and their pencil and started writing on the back of it how much cloud is costing them.
Yeah.
And if you do that calculation, there's a really good argument to keep things on premise. So we can't assume cloud's the only place people will be. It isn't. So, but again, one way to do it is simply describe this is a configuration that will achieve this uptime. That will, the next one, support how many concurrent requests? Do we think we'll get one query an hour of where are these libraries used? That's probably true in a medium-sized enterprise. If you're trying to support thousands of flows in GitHub, you're going to do more than one a second. So what we have to understand there is, what is the target we're designing for? How much data do we think we'll hold? And again, an enterprise versus a shared development resource out in the cloud is very different. So and by the way, how long is it okay to take to respond to that query? The classical thing one talks about is, sub-second response time. Okay. Interesting. Not easy to achieve. And if Steve, I don't think we've ever done any performance modeling for Ortelius, or maybe you have, or Sasha.
Like you said, our query count is pretty low, but the amount of data that we can retrieve can be very large per query. So one of the things that we definitely need to, as one of these NFRs, is to make sure that from like a UI perspective that you don't go and load the whole database for a list view, for example. There's those types of things that we want to be able to, even though our response time would be pretty fast, the amount of volume of data that we're bringing back in that query can affect the response time.
It absolutely will. And you have to think about, in designing databases, insert versus retrieve have, databases that are designed for fast inserting are typically slow to retrieve, and vice versa.
Yep.
For my sins, I used to teach a course at IBM called Architecting for Performance. And so I know a little bit about it. And one of the things you do when you model performance is you take the path of an inquiry or an update through the system and look at each thing it does and how much cost there is. Cost usually is expressed in terms of time and sometimes other kinds of resources. We can do that at some point if you want.
Yeah.
Another,
And I think some of the stuff that Arvin's been working on with on the open telemetry will help us gather that information.
Yeah, and we can also, you don't have to start from knowing a whole lot. You can start from basic paths and say, okay, a data query to this database is probably going to take about this much in the way of milliseconds and retrieve that much in the way of kilobytes of data, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Another non-functional is, security. What are our expectations? Are we willing to be quite open to inquiry, but very, very strict on updating? What do we expect in terms of authenticating a user? I assume it'll be to an external authentication store. Like, Azure, what is it called these days? Entra?
Yeah, I don't know what they've renamed AD to, but they do have basically AD for the cloud that does the cloud-based single sign-on stuff.
Yep, and there are things like, are we going to comply to an identity and access management standard? That sort of thing. Another
Couldn't you
one.
just use GitHub there? Because since we're all on GitHub, wouldn't that be a good way of going?
Yeah, that is another route, and there are libraries for single sign-on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that allow you to plug into any of the identity managers, and GitHub and Google could be one of those identity managers.
So again, one of the ways you handle that is here's what we've designed for, here's what we've tested with. We know it works with Azure Active Directory. We know it works with Google's Identity Manager. But, and Kate's put a comment about that into the chat. So as I said, one of the ways we handle these kind of things is we assert these are the requirements we're driving to, and these are what we've tested with. So usability, again, people sometimes treat that as a non-functional, but generally speaking, at a minimum, have to have some idea of users of our system will probably be developers who are totally knowledgeable of GitHub, or they will be security people who aren't developers at all, but want to answer questions like, am I using this Python library? So we should have some sense of that.
And one of the thoughts is, especially on the querying side, that you don't need to have a user ID to perform queries, but that does allow for an exploit. You think about Docker, Docker Hub. You don't need a user ID to use a Docker image, but they do rate limit you if you start abusing the system, and that may be something that we want to look at. And would that fit into the same concept that you're talking about?
Yes, it would. And remember that, anytime you say I'm opening up a query to anybody without an identity, that enables reconnaissance.
Yep.
So that's one. And what is it, Kate, you're saying? Yep.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep,
We're
so
pretty chatty this morning.
And Raj raised his hand too. I can't see the Zoom because I'm in full screen mode. So, Kate, go ahead, and then Raj.
we're totally talking about you, Steve, so it's good that you can.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Since this is gonna, I think it's so important that if we're going about this from a security standpoint, that we make sure that, as you all know, that we don't do it as add-on, right? That we're coming about cybersecurity from we're doing it as we go along, right? Because it will just cost so much money to go back and do these add-ons.
That's obviously why we document non-functional requirements is, you don't want to wake up and go, darn, I wish I'd done that. Okay, Raj, go ahead. Hang on, let's let Raj go.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I had a question about this slide. Like apart from patching and updating, what makes a 24/7 uptime hard to achieve?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the question.
So the question is, how come 24/7 is hard to do?
Oh, how come 24/7 is hard to do? Okay, well, one of the first reasons is periodically systems need to be updated. Backups need to be taken. If you want to have continuous availability, you have to design so that you can do system backups without causing queries to be stopped. And if you are going to update anything from these days firmware up through the operating system, through the container management system, the containers themselves, have you built in, and Sasha, you posted something about this on Discord just the other day. Have you built in the ability to redirect interactions, user queries or programmatic queries to an instance that's running while you're updating another instance? See, I looked at your diagram, Sasha. And, you also have to answer questions like, is this interaction what's called a long-running query? Now, I don't think Ortelius will get very many of those, but a long-running transaction is something like a mortgage application at a bank, which can take a month to complete. And yeah, like I say, I don't think that'll happen with Ortelius, but you have to ask the question, what happens if I've got a long-running transaction and the system needs to be taken offline to be updated? Can I move that transaction to one that's still up? When I get the first system updated, can I move it back? Do I need to move it back? So is that answering your question, Raj?
Yes, thank you. I didn't think of transactions at all. Yeah.
Well, it's part of this is Ortelius focused, part of it's general. So Steve, you want to go to let me talk about testability, for example. I'm kind of a believer in declaring how you will test something as you start to build it. And the reason is, I don't think, I think that if you cannot test a function, you have to ask the question, why did you build it at all? Okay, can we go to the next slide, Steve?
Yep.
Try and be a little more Ortelius focused. So again, we need to think about, what does a deployment look like? Sasha, you've demonstrated we can do what I would call a tiny deployment, a single desktop.
Yeah, you can
If
do
we
it. Yeah.
think over to a very large instance, we want to team up with the folks at Jenkins and intercept all their flows. What does that look like? So part of it is we have to define, what are maybe we don't use these 4 slices of tiny, small, medium, large, but we have to say an example Ortelius instance is about this big. It's requires a base system with 128 gigs of memory and 8 cores to support this number of containers.
Would
We need to define that. Go ahead, Steve.
would it be better to think of the deployments versus kind of instead of small, small, medium, large, but more around the cloud, not necessarily cloud, but the deployment target, like you said, desktop, maybe on-prem, and then maybe cloud like AWS, and then multi-cloud where you have AWS and Azure, for example. Would it be better to think of deployments like that, or more in the small, medium, large, based on the
I
number
think
of
of them
users?
as a little bit separate. I can bring up a very small Azure instance. There's even a free tier if I want something really small. That maybe I don't keep my Ortelius instance on my premise at all.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that it's in a cloud or not in a cloud, cloud's one way you get the high volumes, but cloud's also a way you can have a really inexpensive small case. So I don't think it's cloud or not cloud.
Okay.
And related to that are this notion of volumetrics. How many interactions? Another one that you see in database systems is, am I going to open a connection and hold it open? That even gets down to, the TCP level. How long do I hold up open connections? So I think we need to, be clear about, you connect, make a query, disconnect, or do you connect, stay connected for the week? Because those will have different demands on a system. Data stored, and then as you point out, Steve, data retrieved. So we probably want to say an update to Ortelius telling it that I'm using a library in this build is about that big, but a retrieve might be that big. And, with some clarity of what that means. I think another one is, what about backups? One of the funny things about open source is you can't even tell who's going to use it. So we don't know what they'll do for backups, but we probably ought to at least say, here are the important things to back up. Here's about how often you ought to do it. And here's what the impact on a system is. And if you are restoring, maybe some guidance about that. And then I think testing. We should probably talk about what kind of tests And maybe we should simply say, when we do an update to Ortelius, this is the testing we would typically do. That starts to veer over into, the application side as opposed to the non-functional side, but I think all things we should think about.
Right.
Questions or comments about those?
Tony, can we turn you into a language model so we can have an AI version of you?
Absolutely. The subscription's $50 a month.
It's like when you're sleeping, I can use you during my workday, right?
You can always send me a query, and I should point out, Kate, this is, I think, the first thing to join us on, has been an architect for a long time and is quite good. Don't forget to ask her too.
We have a Kate AI and a Tony AI and a Steve AI. Awesome.
Yeah. So here's another thing is deployment diagrams. When someone's contemplating installing Ortelius, and I spelled cloud cleverly, didn't I? I was trying to get in-house and on cloud,
Oh, yeah.
spelled rather weirdly. So if you're
You
going
created
to,
a new word.
indeed, if you're going to deploy a single instance, and Sasha, you've got that well documented, but we should probably say, this is roughly, or even this is what we know our instances look like. Again, it's open source. You can change it and do other stuff, but if you want to base it on what we've done, we should probably have some documentation of that.
Now, when you talk about deployment diagrams, are you referring to like a flow diagram or more like what we currently have? We have documents with the steps that you need to do.
Neither. What I'm saying is, if I'm going to allocate a cloud instance, Steve,
Uh-huh.
how many VMs, how many containers will go on which one, what tier within Amazon or Azure or Google Cloud
Oh, okay.
do I need to have? Because that's going to go right to somebody's financials.
Got it.
Okay. You want to go to the last slide then?
Yeah, just,
Okay, so like fungible components, what should we change out? Is this the only data system we've tested with, but others will probably work? Or is this the only one, and if you break it, then you have to get into the code. It's open source, you can. And here's where you should look. So those are kinds of things. What about container runtimes and containers? Or if somebody's a VM shop instead of a container shop? We don't have to support any of those. We just have to say, this is what we know works. And are there any operating system sensitivities? What if you like SUSE instead of Red Hat? Or Ubuntu? Or one of about 60 other Linux distros?
yeah, or if you want to run on the mainframe.
Yeah, or Windows Server, whatever it's currently being called. And again, a way to handle that is, here's what we work with and how it worked, and here's stuff that, you're welcome to join the team and work on an instance of it, but it's not something we already know about.
So in this case, it's okay to just to define the box that we're living in currently.
Absolutely. And again, I would encourage, if someone says, man, I gotta move to this other version of something, great, get involved, contact you, Steve, and talk about how can you help with that. But we should tell people, this is what the box we live in. Kate, did you want to add anything to that?
I think the only thing that I've seen, while I understand that we live in the box, and definitely because of amount of hands that will be doing this, it's good to have it multi-cloud. So that, I know it can't be done tomorrow. And I really do believe in the both on off-prem, which I saw that you have there, which is really important. the question I would have, and maybe you guys have already thought about this, but what if a vulnerability comes out? How quickly can you update these systems? That's why I would think that you would need this cloud instance, so it can be done quicker. But how are you going to push that out? You know, like when Log4j came, how did you guys? How do you see that happening?
Yeah, that's an interesting point because for us, we're, so we have basically a Dependabot that is running every hour to go and fix known vulnerabilities by just grabbing the latest version, and then we go through a quick string test as part of that. And so we have a new version available multiple times a day of Ortelius. Now, like you said, these other companies that have it installed, they may have a release process where they only update once a month their the products. So making that notification process is going to be something that we definitely need to work on and figure out what the best method is to get that information to folks.
Yeah, I know when I was at IBM, we had a target of very frequent releases. And when you talk to CIOs, they generally said, I'm really struggling to stay up with your releases.
Mm-hmm.
So a once a month update for a lot of organizations is
It's a
considered
lot.
blazing fast.
Yeah,
You get good
exactly.
in
It,
that.
it just makes me think about, though, from a cybersecurity point of view, and let's liken it to these messages that we get on our phone when somebody's, I don't know if you've seen like sort of like a red alert when somebody's taken, or I don't know, weather event type of idea, where all of a sudden you get this blast from your phone. If we're thinking with cybersecurity in mind, what concerns me is basically 0 days, right? How do we get that out there? Because when there's a 0 day, I mean, then, then as you guys know, on the darknet, you have all these groups being able to take advantage of the 0 day. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, the notification part to folks has always been a mystery to me on how to do it effectively.
Yeah.
Because just putting something on a Slack channel and saying it's your responsibility to go check the Slack channel, it just doesn't work. Because they never do it. The folks are too overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
if we can figure out a way to do it, would be very nice.
And I wonder if we should make that part of the NFR as something like, do we want to do like a hope for type of idea, like a nice to have, but not, something so that we're always thinking about these things as we're creating.
Yeah, because the interesting part that you bring up, both you and Tony, is we have two types of notifications that we need to make. One is Ortelius itself has a vulnerability and it's been fixed. You need to go apply that update to your instance of Ortelius. And then the other side that you're kind of referring to, Kate, is Ortelius is seeing that there's a 0 day vulnerability that people are using out there from this open source package. How do we let everybody know that they need to go and update their code to resolve that 0 day? So we have two different scenarios, kind of.
Yeah.
One way to do that would be first focus on making sure people understand what's the current version of Ortelius, and I don't know if we can assume that they'll catch the once an hour or once a day updates. How do we do the version numbering now, Steve?
It's semantic. So it mostly is based on the build number. So when we have all the bots running, they're bumping versions based on the build number.
Okay.
So and then if we do something bigger, if we add like a new feature or something like that, then we go ahead and manually bump one of the like the patch number or higher up, like maybe a release number.
So one approach that comes to mind is put something up on the Ortelius website with the current build number and date. And the trick obviously is make that meaningful. If it's updated every 2 hours, I don't know how useful that is. But where people, and ideally, I mean, it's like people could subscribe to it, either RSS feed or some other way.
Mm-hmm.
Or, what you don't want to do is send them an email once an hour. That's not useful.
Yeah, and that's kind of the dilemma is information overload.
You know how they have
I
different,
have an,
sorry, go ahead, please.
Arvind.
I think I think since we are doing it like major.minor.batch, we should inform them when we have a minor releases. And we can do small changes in the patch version and we do not like give notification about the patch one. When we have the minor or major changes in our software, we ask them for the updates. So in this way we can like cover a lot of small issues or lot of small improvement in the patch versions.
Yeah, so I think that's a good approach. If there's something where, again, maybe just put it up on the website that indicates this is the current important version number, and go over to GitHub if you need to grab the most current copy. Would
Now,
be
one thing we do, then I'll get to you, Sasha, is we do take and add Ortelius components to the Ortelius. So you can, because it's tracking itself for vulnerabilities and things like that, we can actually create a difference report that will show everything that's changed between the current release and the release that you're running, that type of scenario. So we can kind of, if people aren't monitoring, the everyday changes, that we can give them based on your current version and what's out there today. These are all the things that have changed that you need to know about. So that capability is there. We have Sasha and Kate from what I can see on my screen.
Ladies
You
first.
can probably stop sharing this too, Steve.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sasha, you were first.
Are you sure? Okay. So I have one method. I use it for myself. So I feel like because I'm part of an open source project, which is Ortelius, I have my own Discord server. So I don't believe I should go and fetch information. I believe it should come to me, right? So I just created a little postman bot that sends me all the information I'm interested to into specific channels, right? Into my own personal Discord server. And it works amazing. It's like, so for example, I know this is just another way of doing something, but it works for me, right? I'm not saying this is going to work for everyone else, but it works amazing. So I have my own personal Discord server. I made a little postman bot, and I believe in consolidating APIs to talk into a single channel, right? So I can take any API from around the world, I can push it to Pipedream. Pipedream then goes, cool, I'll send it into Sasha's Discord channel and send it to the specific channel that I'm interested in that specific technology. So for example, I have Ortelius channel. I even have an Ortelius channel for any media that gets released. It comes straight into my personal Ortelius channel, and I don't even have to go look. There's no noise for me now, right? Because it's just my personal server. There's no one else on there. It's only me.
I really like that a ton. And I wonder if that would be a part of like the deployment type of, and I'm not saying that we have to use Discord, but because Sasha, I mean, tell me, you know, you don't, if you're in the energy business, or if you're in the financial business or whatever, you know, power and gas, power and utility, excuse me, or gas and oil, aren't you only going to want certain security events coming?
Yeah, we can filter that. So I can tell Pipedream takes APIs and you can centralize them, right? So I can tell Pipedream, I'm not interested in this information. I'm only interested in this information. And then it pushes it into, I mean, I get it all the time. I use it for my Synology at home. Every time my Synology has because South Africa's got really bad power problems, I know on my phone and because Discord's on my phone, I know exactly when it's disconnected and when it's connected. I know when there's an update on my Synology. I know when there's packages being, I know everything about my Synology at home, my private cloud, right? I call it my private cloud.
And that's what
it works. Yeah.
I mean, what he's saying, what Sasha's saying, I mean, that's how we should think about, I think, the delivery of this. I mean, this should very much become part of the non-functional, because especially considering small to medium, I mean, this is where the majority, I have, you know, like a real passion around small and medium businesses, because as you don't know, Tony, I mean, from being, you know, with the open group during that time, they're being swallowed up. I mean, they're just, you know, it's just too much. And so how do we do it so it's personalized? And what Sasha is saying, I think is brilliant.
So that's how I personalize my interaction with Ortelius, right? Because I'm part of this open source community. So that's how I know what's going on. And I think that's maybe a step forward. You know, I could even send Jira tickets or GitHub tickets to my channel that Steve assigns me.
Part of this depends upon answering the question, who needs to consume this information?
Yeah, exactly.
There are going to be different communities. There are going to be developers building something new. There is also going to be an organizational, you know, risk, who are typically governance, risk, and compliance people, and even legal people who want to answer the question, am I exposed? Do I need to remediate this thing?
Exactly.
Those
you can filter that through an API tool like Pipedream, right? Because I see it like a radio station. You just tune into the radio station that you want to listen to. That's it.
If we pick the one we want to use, that's fine. Kate, you've been wanting to say something though.
Well, along again to what Sasha's saying, and I'll just say, I mean, you know, when I was with IBM or when I was with these larger organizations, you know, the ones that would, as a vendor, actually end up kicking us out are the folks like Sasha, who was really involved in technology, and they would be able to sort of, you know, outdo these, you know, bigger vendors because they were in tune with these things. I think if I'm, and again, folks, I'm just coming on board here, but if I'm thinking about the mission statement, I mean, don't we sort of want to equalize? I mean, isn't this about equalizing around the world?
It's definitely the democratization of data.
And in so doing, then don't we want to go after, you know, the Sashas of the world? I mean, don't we want to help them be able to not only help them personally, but help them within the business that they're in, whatever.
And the scary thing is, Kate, it's all free.
Yeah,
you don't have to pay a cent.
which is beautiful. You know, it really is. I mean, you know, and this helps all of us collectively, you know, to, you know, because we're being crushed. We're being crushed out there. And look, the bad guys they're getting it. The bad actors understand. The bad actors are getting together. They're using the tools out there and everything else. It's sort of like, you know, crowdsourcing at its best. I mean, what I see when I look at the mission statement, this idea of, hey, let's get the good guys together. Let's go out. Let's fight this, you know? It's, you know, and I don't know. Anyway.
And the great thing about Pipedream is I've got a log. I've got history now of my device and how it's performing and what's happening on it. I can see when it was connected and disconnected to the UPS. I can see when a Cloudflare server was under, you know, I can see every single thing just on a single pane of glass, just like that.
And honestly, I mean, we would go into really large, you know, utility companies And I've come across people like Sasha, and I didn't really, you know what I mean? I wasn't able to overcome, why spend millions of dollars
Yeah.
when you're getting, and I think, by looking at that mission statement, if that's what we're trying to do, then I think if I'm looking at the non-functional requirements, then these are the things we need to start to design.
Yeah.
And we need to have both. I mean, we need to have on-prem, we need to have cloud, we need to have
Yeah.
multi different cloud instances.
Yeah.
And I think
great,
when we
yeah.
I think when we write down the non-functionals around this notification process, that we have to go beyond just saying that there's a log out there that somebody can look at.
Yeah.
That I think that is not very useful, because you could look at, we could say we want to push all of our outputs and our notifications to Datadog. Just pick a vendor, and then it's Datadog's responsibility for getting that information to the developer, to the CISO officer, and stuff like that. Which more than likely they're not going to be, a CISO officer is not going to be looking at Datadog. More than likely, this fine detailed information. So I think that's something when we write them down, I think we have to make sure that we get it phrased in a way that people can actually use it.
Can I share my screen quickly? Are you guys cool with it?
Let's go to Arvin first.
Okay.
What do you got, Arvin?
Yeah. If people are using Ortelius or Deploy Hub, mostly the changes that people are going to do are the developers. I'm not sure how a CEO or a project manager can understand what are the internal stuff going there. So I think we are in a safe if we allowed only developers to do that.
Well,
Because
I think.
non-developers,
Go ahead.
they have to learn a lot about coding and microservices to do that stuff.
Well, I think on that front, when we talk about the audience for the non-functional, Kate and I kind of had this conversation, was it yesterday or the day before, that a CIO can understand that a red box is bad, a yellow one I gotta kind of do something with, and a green one I'm good, and leave it at that high level for them to then go talk to the people that work to them and say, why is this box red?
You know what I would do, Steve? I would skip all the management and just let it auto remediate and give them a report at the end of the day. That's what I would do.
That's the long-term goal, is to put the automated remediation in place, but still somebody's going to even have to sign off on the auto remediation at some point.
Yeah, the problem with remediation is somebody that's running a 2-year-old version of SAP, and it took them 4 years to implement. And that's pretty common, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just turned off their supply chain management because you remediated something. That's bad.
Yeah.
All right, Sasha, what do you got for us?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just tell me if I'm boring you guys.
Yes.
Hold on. I'm just trying to figure out which screen, how to share my screen again. Can you see
Yeah,
me?
we see Discord.
Can you see Discord? Oh wait, hold on.
Oh no, it's a project screen. You got it right.
Can you see the project screen?
Yeah, I see.
Okay, so this is Pipe Dream, right? So what I do is, it doesn't matter, right? I don't care. I can consume any cloud service in the world, but all I do is create myself a project. For example, here's my Synology, just as an example. Like Synology could be a cloud, right? I don't care. It's a cloud. It's got storage, it's got CPU, it's a cloud, it's got networking, it's a cloud. It's got a firewall I can host services on it. Who cares, right? I don't care where it is. It can be Google, AWS, GCP. I really don't care. I have a single email address that triggers the workflow. So I point all the APIs here, okay, to this email address for my Synology, and then I filter it, right? I can get crazy. I just don't have enough time, right? If I had more time, I could go bananas here. But I'm just trying to show you how you can do it, right? So it'll hit that, right? And then the bot I made goes into my Synology channel. and you can see all the tracking. It looks pretty ugly. I can make it neater, but hey, who cares? I'm an engineer. I know what it looks like. I know what I'm looking for, and
Yep.
that's it, right? I can filter this now with Pipedream. It's an API tool, right? I can go mad on Pipedream. I can, if I'm a developer with applications, serious application tools, you can do radical things with this, right?
And
And it's
Steve, I
free.
mean,
You
this
see in the
is,
bottom corner here, 100 credits. I haven't used any. It's insane.
Nice.
And Steve, I mean, this
Yeah.
is sort of what I was talking about. I mean, red, green is go. I mean, it was very
Yeah.
simple. I mean, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
if you wanted to do that deep dive, you could. But all they needed to see was, green, yellow, and, actually they didn't like red. I don't know why. They wanted orange, but I just,
Orange.
okay.
Orange is good.
Like,
It's a
all
nice
right.
change.
We'll go
I don't want to see
crimson.
any red.
Crimson.
Yes.
I'm just
It
showing you
sounds
how
funny,
easy it
but I
is,
actually
right?
find that
Yeah.
crimson renders better on a screen than red.
Yeah. But it's actually really easy, right? It's actually quite simple. It's
Yeah.
like, and then bypass all your managers. We get an AI in here to auto remediate the things we want to remediate, because managers, for me personally, I'm sorry, get in the way all the time and make
Yeah.
life worse for the engineer. I'm sorry they do. I'm working in a company where the problem is the managers, not the engineers. Yeah, I can't progress with my work today because of a manager issue, right? Because manager is trying to control everything. This sucks as an engineer. I've got AI. I could get it to auto remediate things that you agree to, right? Why do I need you to sign off on every little thing like micromanagement? That's terrible. Anyway, that's just me, guys. Okay, I'll stop now.
You wouldn't be the only person.
Huh?
You wouldn't be the only person.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone else finds it in there. I mean, you always, it's so cool to me all around the world. I just find managers get in the way, man. It's like, stop
But
blocking me. I know how to play with the Lego. I go to my architect, I get a sign off from my architect, right? Not from the manager. I go to Kate, or I go to Steve, or I go to a Tony, right? And then they pick holes in my proposal, and then I come back to them and say, "No, do you like it now? No, you missed this. Okay, thanks." And I go back, right? Simple. I don't know. Maybe that's too simple.
So we got a few minutes left. Is there anything else we need to cover, Tony?
That was what I wanted to talk about. What I'd suggest going forward is pick one issue and we think about it, and decide how we're going to express whatever it is we want to talk about.
Yep.
Do that every, I don't know, once a month or something.
All right.
In case there's
Yeah,
some-
I got to hunt down our original architecture document, and I will put what we talked about. I wouldn't say necessarily bullet points, but some context that what we talked about into that document, so we have a shared doc we can work from,
Okay.
and we can pick each one and start adding on to it.
Really good. And again, Kate knows what she's talking about too, so I'd make sure she gets lots of work dumped on her.
And I'm happy to do it right now because I'm not
Sounds good.
technically looking. So,
Alrighty. Well, thank you, Tony, for pulling this together. Very informative, and thanks for everybody and their contribution. Once I get the documents sorted out, I'll make sure that it gets shared out so everybody knows where it's at and the section that we're going to be working on. Does that sound like a plan?
it does.
Sounds good.
Take care all. Have a good weekend, folks.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.